It's a challenging time to be a teacher. We don't get paid a lot, the days can be long and exhausting, demands from students, parents, admins, and districts can be intense. There's always room for improvement, and there is always more to do. There are always new procedures to learn, new programs to run, new strategies to master. But it's when our fire burns the lowest that we remember our purpose. We teach because we're resilient. We teach because we're problem solvers. We teach because investing in kids is one of the highest callings we can imagine. We teach because we know that the classroom can be a place of magic and possibility. We teach because we have an unquenchable fire for learning and a passion to share it. We teach because our colleagues are some of the best human beings we will ever meet. We teach because we have an opportunity to influence the global citizens that will make this world a better place. If you're still on fire for learning and growth, join the Teachers on Fire Roundtable for conversations that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your practice. You'll hear from real people and real educators with real solutions, not make-believe perfection, but ideas, inspiration, and a path toward change and transformation in K-12 education today. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I'm inviting you to join us at the Teachers on Fire Roundtable. Because you matter, your voice is important, and we are all better together. Welcome back, Teachers on Fire, to another great conversation that I know will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. And I'm joined today by Todd Whitaker, author of What Great Principals Do Differently. Can't wait to get into that. But first of all, I want to introduce my amazing co-host, Michelle Papa. Michelle, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Tim. I'm really excited to be here with both of you today. So my name is Michelle Papa. I am an educator out of New Jersey. I have been an English teacher and an assistant principal for the past 5 years. And will be for the next week and a half until I move into a new role to serve as a middle school principal. So the work of Todd Whitaker has greatly impacted and influenced me. So I'm so excited and honored to speak with him today. So Todd, would you introduce yourself?
Sure, it's an honor. That was quite an introduction, and it's way better than the guest is. So I need people to lower their expectations, and we'll reach every one of those. I'm Todd Whitaker. I work at the University of Missouri, and I'm honored to be with you all today.
Well, that was a very modest introduction, but thank you, Todd. We are so thrilled to have you with us, and it's great to see some of our audience members welcoming Fonz from Texas, Bobby French, Jenna Kemp from LinkedIn. We've got Jacqueline Franges from LinkedIn as well. So thank you for joining us. Let us know where you're viewing from, and feel free to throw some of your questions for Todd into the chat as we get going here. But Todd, I'm going to open it up and press you maybe a little bit further if I can. Would you give people a sense of your current work in education? What does that look like for you right now?
Well, I'm at University of Missouri. I'm kind of a part-time nobody, but I work in the principal superintendent preparation program. And just as a little selfish plug here, our programs now are 100% online. And so we've expanded where we have people from all over the world applying to be in our master's program, specialists in EDD. And the thing that's neat is my wife's in charge of the master's program, and she's way better than I am. And I get to join it when she allows me to. And it's a little different than other programs. It's 14 months, K-12 principal's license. And the difference is in most programs, you read books. In our program, you meet the authors. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about, I just know them all. And so we have them come and join the group, and that really makes it exciting. And we'd love to have other people be a part of that. So that's what I do. And then I go around, and I'm very blessed. I have a chance to speak to groups around the world. Zoom's been a blessing. The other day, I spoke to 59,000 people by Zoom, which was kind of a neat thing. I told them, I said, you get ready to get blown away because I'm going to present in 8 languages simultaneously. And if that's impressive, take a look at my PowerPoint. And then they realized that was just a joke and it was the same old person. So they were a little let down, but it was fun. And so Zoom's been fun. And then I'm, again, now speaking in person. I think I have like 34 presentations in August already, multiples in most days. And most in person, some virtual, and I'm very blessed, and I write books. My 61st book is coming out in October, and so far 2 of them have been good. And so your goal is to figure out which 2, and but I've had really good co-authors on them, and that's been fun. And one of my big highlights is having a chance to join you all.
Awesome. I saw AJ Bianco's here. Thank you for joining us. So we'll move into our next question, if that's okay, Tim.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Todd, would you tell us a little bit about the context of what Great Principles Do Differently? I guess that's one of the 2 good books. So why did you write it? And how did the 20 things come about? You didn't start with 20 because there's many versions. So how did it get to 20?
Yeah. Well, how it all started, believe it or not, it was started off my dissertation, in which I identified in Missouri middle schools principals. And what I did was, and I've done this, replicated this many times, my books are all based on research. You just don't know it because I try to write informally so people will actually want to read them. And so what I do is, like, we survey teachers of every middle school in the state of Missouri. And we survey them as to the effectiveness of their principal. We have principal effectiveness instruments. We have a teacher effectiveness instrument we use. We have a variety of things that have all been scored and normed and verified. And so then I went to 4 of the schools with the most effective principals in the state and 4 of the schools with the least effective principals in the state, interviewed the teachers and interviewed the principals. And that was kind of the foundation. And since then, I've probably done 20 other studies that are similar to this. And that's where some of the expansion comes from. The other thing, I actually hardly ever read books. I'm embarrassed to tell you. And I'm going to say something joking, but it's true. I'm one of the few people you've ever known who's written more books than they've read. And sadly, that's very close to being true. But my inspiration for adding or writing things is I hear people say stuff. I see stuff on social media. I see other people's books, and they're just wrong. And they're leading people in the wrong direction. And I don't want them to be led in the wrong direction. Think about how many times you hear people, we need to, the American education system needs to be blown up, that it's all dysfunctional. And it's just wrong. There's just people who don't know. They exaggerate. They say ridiculous things. In every school, you have at least one teacher that's cracked the Da Vinci Code. So why would they need to be blown up? And in every state and province in Canada and different sections around the world, you have multiple schools that have achieved incredible things. Why would we blow them up? Wouldn't we just try to replicate them? And so it's a different way of thinking. And instead, it's so cool to say, we need to blow up education. We need to do this. And it's embarrassing for people to say that because they're really not putting any thought into it at all. And so I try to help give them a little guidance that maybe is a little more accomplishable than a wild idea like that.
I'd like to say hello to Sierra. I hope I'm saying your name correctly in Saskatoon. John, listening in from the UK on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us, John. Let us know if you've got any questions for Todd. And Fonz, again, tuning in here. And Fonz has got a question. So, Michelle, I'd like to divert from our line of questions for Todd, if that's all right, and throw this one to him. So Fonz is asking, you mentioned once, Todd, that you are only as strong as your strongest link. I don't know if you remember that quote, but Fonzo is asking you to expand on that a little bit. So could you talk about you're only as strong as your strongest link?
Sure. Vince Lombardi, who's very famous, a successful football coach, used to say you're only as strong as your weakest link. And because someone said it, people just repeat it. But if you put any thought into it, if you say you're only as strong as your weakest link, who did you just give all the power to? Your weakest link. Folks, you can't afford to give all your power to your weakest link. You're in trouble. It's funny. I used to coach basketball, and the Chicago Bulls had a run that was they were pretty famous, about won 6 championships. And I assumed that had something to do with Michael Jordan. But apparently it had something to do with the night custodian, because that was the weakest link. And what's happened with the Bulls since then, that night, it wasn't Michael Jordan retiring. I assumed that had something to do with it. Apparently it's when the night custodian retired. And I think the thing to realize is we're only as strong as our weakest link if everything we do is a chain. If everything, and then the weakest link causes that. No, we're a rope. And the strongest link, everything adds fibers to it. And what happens is it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And think how many more fibers the strongest person adds than the weakest person. But if you think of it as a link, then you're thinking the weakest person is equally as important as the strongest person in your school. And that's just incorrect. Somebody wrote me yesterday and asked for their brand new principal, and they asked for advice. And I mentioned 3 things. But one of the things I mentioned was if you make every decision based on your best teachers, you'll never make a wrong decision. Because your best teachers, who is your strongest link, has a vision of the entire school. There are very few people in a school that always want everyone else to succeed. Because we have egos, we are threatened, whatever this is. But there are very few people in a school that always want everyone else to succeed. And your best teachers are those people. And so realizing if I'm thinking, what would they want me to do? How would they want me to handle it? And I make decisions based on them, I'm improving my school. I'm not basing decisions for them. I'm basing decisions on them because they want the whole school to improve.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Todd. So in that same regard, could you maybe talk a little bit about when you mentioned the idea that the principal sets the tone for the school, specifically this notion that if the principal sneezes, everyone catches a cold? What do you mean by that?
Well, that's not quite as funny in the COVID era, but it does apply.
Behind the mask.
Behind the
mask. We still sneeze.
I just tweeted something this week, and it came into my head, and it's that great principals are always role models. And so are poor ones. Because what happens is role modeling is not enough. We have to be a role model, but it's not enough. Because if you think role modeling is enough, in your school, Michelle and Tim, in your schools, do you have at least one teacher that is always dressed professionally?
Of course.
Then how come the whole school is not dressed professionally? If role modeling was enough. But it isn't enough. And have you ever seen a school where the principal is dressed professionally, but the faculty isn't? And in professional dress, I don't mean to overplay that like that's a big deal. It's just an easy example. So role modeling isn't enough. There has to be so much more than that. But I think it's the tone, the mood. As a principal, I was a high school principal at 25. And as a principal, I was in classrooms every single day. And my last school had 1,350 middle school kids. And I was in classrooms every single day and my assistant principal. But the reason I could do that was because I realized that, and this goes along with Fonz's question, I realized, Fonz, by the way, I hope you have a happy days. I realized that the reason I could be in classrooms every single day is because I determined that the student who's sent to the office is the least important student in the school. And I'm going to quit making them out to be the most important student in the school. No one supports teachers like I do. No one. If you've read any of my books, I mean, and I teach everybody how to do it. But what happens is the thing I determined is I'm not in a hurry to deal with the kid who gets sent to the office because there's not a teacher in the school in a hurry to get the kid back. And if your secretary is any good, they can deal with 3 dysfunctional kids better than your 3 worst teachers can deal with 3 dysfunctional kids. But setting that tone in a school, and I'm in classrooms, and the reason I'm in classrooms, the number one reason is I have to teach people how to treat the kids, how to talk to the kids, how we say please and thank you, how we say ladies and gentlemen, how we treat every student with respect and dignity every single day. Now I have to teach you in addition to model it, but if I don't model it, I don't know how that's going to spread in my school. And so you thought I was in classrooms to focus on instruction. I start in class, I do, but I start in classrooms to focus on how we treat and interact with people. And the principal sets the tone one way or the other, just like the principal is the role model one way or the other.
Todd, how do we reinforce the concept that it's people, not programs, who matter most? And I think about all of the programs out there right now. We've got our SEL programs, literacy programs, equity programs. How do we build this notion that it's people first?
Okay. Are either of you familiar with alternative seating in classrooms? Flexible seating?
Flexible.
Big trend, flexible seating. Okay. I got a question for you. Michelle, you were the first one to nod, so I'm going to ask you. Michelle, can you name at least one outstanding teacher that would be outstanding using flexible seating?
Yes.
Okay. Can you name at least one outstanding teacher that would be outstanding not using flexible seating?
Definitely.
Can you name at least one ineffective teacher that would be ineffective using flexible seating?
Yes.
Can you name at least one ineffective teacher that would be ineffective not using flexible seating?
Sure.
What is not the variable?
The seating. It's the teacher.
It's always the teacher. And I'm guessing in Canada too, maybe, but Tim, I could be incorrect. I don't mean to assume that a year ago, March, almost everybody went virtual overnight.
Right.
And what made it so hard was we didn't have a dress rehearsal. We just went to opening night. Mm-hmm. But I have a question, Tim. In your school, could you name 3 teachers that went virtual overnight? Could you name 3 teachers you knew were going to figure it out?
Yes.
Could you name 3 teachers you knew were never going to figure it out?
Don't like to say that publicly, but maybe.
Okay. You don't have to say it out loud. Just wink twice. Got it. Okay. Thanks for the clue.
And would have trouble for sure.
And when we come back and have students in person, the 3 teachers that couldn't figure out virtual have never figured out in person either.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 ways to improve your school.
Right.
You only have 2 ways. Hire better teachers and improve the ones you have. Everything else you're doing is literally a waste of time. But here's exactly what happens. The best teacher thinks, I'm going to use flexible seating. It will accommodate the kids. We can have more, and the kids will be excited about learning and all this stuff. So the best teacher uses flexible seating. An average principal sees the best teacher in the school using flexible seating. Tim, why does that principal think that teacher is so good?
Because of the seating, I guess.
Right. And so guess what they do? They think the key is seating, the program. So they mandate seating.
Yeah.
And Tim, I know this isn't true in your school, but I promise it's true in Michelle's. The worst teacher in a school cannot teach with rows and structure, much less flexible seating. But it's mandated, so the worst teacher does flexible seating. The class is completely chaotic every day, so the average principal thinks the problem's what?
The seating.
And they eliminate flexible seating.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't a single program that, it's like clip up, clip down. It's like assertive discipline. It's like anything. Great teachers do it right. Crummy teachers do it wrong. And it's never the program. It's always the people. We just get confused. And it's a lot easier to change the program than it is to change the people.
That's true. That's true.
Great. Thank you, Todd. So then you have this very inspiring and positive idea that we should treat everyone as if they're good. So how did this originate? Was it a particular experience that you had? Was it an experience you had with a staff member or a student or something that happened in your personal life? Where did this come from for you?
Well, I think almost all of my ideas are just self-reflection.
Okay.
Do you like being treated poorly? Do you like being criticized?
Nope.
You know? Would you like it if your husband said, you go to a party and your husband goes, Michelle, you look great at this party. I'm not kidding. You were the second best looking woman there. You know? And yet, objectively, that seems like a compliment, but subjectively, that seems like an insult. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
But objectively, that's a compliment, isn't it? Number 2 out of 50. I mean, that's pretty good. But anyway.
Right.
And what happens is, if you've read Shifting the Monkey, and I'm not a book salesperson, I'm truly not at all, because the publisher makes more money out of it than I do. But I just share things so people can have follow-up learning if they want it. And I talk fast. Think about things, and I call them blanket monkeys. And blanket monkeys are where instead of dealing with the individual person who's doing things incorrectly, we make a new rule and throw it on everybody. State departments are excellent at blanket monkeys. They don't deal with the dysfunctional schools and the dysfunctional districts. They make new rules and things for everybody because they're afraid of the dysfunctional people. Another word is gutless. Think about, have either of you ever received notes that said, some principals haven't turned in the reports yet? Of course you have. And which principals are most offended? The good ones. And you know what they're thinking? Hey, dillweed, why don't you talk to them? Why are you talking to me? There's only 11 of us. You know which 2 it is. But average principals have been role modeled by someone incorrect. And average principals then send notes around that say, some teachers have not turned in their grades yet. And which teacher's most concerned? The best teacher whose life is completely driven by guilt. And they get that note and they run down to the office and they double check. Or a principal has a faculty meeting and talks to all the teachers about one teacher. And they're going, sometimes some of you are coming late, sometimes some of you are coming late, sometimes some of you, who's most offended? The good teacher. And you know what they're thinking? What are you talking to me for? Why don't you talk to her? She's not even here yet. And then what happens is that principal role modeled incorrectly, and we do it all the time. And then teachers punish the whole class, lecture the whole class, coaches run the entire team because one kid skipped practice because we're afraid of the people that don't do it correctly. Yeah. And we just keep role modeling that all the time. And so that's treating people as if they were bad. And I realize you treat people as if they were good. And what's funny is when you treat people as if they were good, good people like it and bad people don't. When you treat people as if they were bad, bad people like it and good people don't. And which one are we making decisions on? You're only as strong as your strongest link, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Todd, there's a lot that's been said about not simply returning to education as normal in the fall. So we've had this remarkable year that's looked different in every district, every state. And, from all variations of remote, hybrid, and so forth. What are your thoughts about how we return to education in the fall? And, what would be your advice for principals, superintendents, and district leaders?
How about the great people return to normal, and how about the other people don't? Because see, that's a blanket monkey. Isn't that exactly a blanket monkey? How about we return to normal? It's so funny. I tweeted something the other day, and I had Twitter on my mind because my Twitter account got hacked. So anyhow, if anybody has any great ideas out there on how to unhack Twitter, contact me. My website's toddwhitaker.com, and my email's on there, and I'd love it. But you do need to go ahead and send your Social Security number to the Romanian princess. That's the only thing I can assure you that is true on my Twitter account. What was your question? I just forgot.
Post-COVID.
It's funny. I tweeted something the other day, and I said, the problem isn't people that are resistant to change. The problem is people that are resistant to improvement. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, isn't it the same thing? And I go, it's not even close to the same thing. I don't care. Your best teacher at times is resistant to change, aren't they? Sure. You know why? Because your idea is wrong. Your idea is worse than what they're doing. So do you really want them to change? But they're not resistant to improvement, are they? And so what do you mean don't go back to normal? We've got to stop wielding a hatchet and start wielding a scalpel. I'm hoping my best teachers come back to normal. I did a lot of Zooms with people during leadership during times of crisis over the last year and a half. And by the way, leadership during times of crisis is exactly the same as leadership not during crisis, but I just say it that way because it seems catchy. Anyhow, one of the things I asked principals to do is I said, I want you, when everybody was remote, I said, what I want you to do is I want you to call your very best teacher. Don't be gutless in email. Don't take a chicken's way out. Call them. And I want you to say this to your very best teacher. Everybody's remote. Because they go, how can we motivate people when we're not together? I said, call them, and I want you to tell them this. Do you know what I miss most about school? You. Mm-hmm. I miss seeing kids excited coming into your classroom. I miss seeing your smiling face, and I can just see your heart when you greet the kids. I miss kids talking about you in the lunchroom, passing time, recess. I miss hearing kids saying to the other kid, hey, what class you going to next? And they mention your class, and the other kids go, jealous. I miss walking into your classroom and not wanting to leave. I miss hearing you start a project and can't wait to see what the project's going to look like with the kids. I miss when I walk in the middle of a story and I don't want to leave because I don't know what's going to happen to Ricky, Ticky, Taffy. I miss that. And people go, Todd, you used to be a principal. Don't you miss the students? And I go, sure. But I really miss the teachers. They're the core of the school. The students would be gone, but the teachers are the crux of your school. So the ineffective people, I hope, don't return to normal. But all we really need is the principals not to return to normal. And then everything else can work out. That's really what it is. There isn't anything else besides that. Somebody said, Todd, how does the principal take care of the students? And I go, I don't know. The principal takes care of the teachers, and the teachers take care of the students. That's the way it's going to be. You treat teachers as if they were special, and they start to act special. That's treating people as if they were good.
Awesome.
I'm going to go off script a little bit here, Tim, because I'm just thinking while you're talking, Todd.
Now I'm nervous.
Oh, no. Well, you have this idea of great principals, being loyal to their students, to their teachers, and to their school. And then the idea that great principals expect loyalty to students and the school to take precedence over loyalty to themselves. What does that look like? What does that mean to you?
Okay, ineffective leaders demand loyalty to themselves at any level. Any leader you've ever heard who demands loyalty to themselves is inherently ineffective because you're putting time and energy into things that don't really matter. What it really matters is this. I am always going to be loyal to my students and loyal to my teachers, and thus the school. What's interesting is I need teachers that stand up for their kids against me when I'm wrong. And I'm trying to be right. I don't mean it like I'm routinely trying to do things wrong, but I need a teacher who goes, Todd, that's unfair. Todd, that's unreasonable. Todd, this is inappropriate. I need teachers. It's really funny. If you've read my book, Motivate and Inspire Teachers, I have 2 chapters in there on the Friday Focus, which is the single best leadership tool I've ever used in my life. And one of my teachers read it, one of my superstars would read it before it ever went in anybody's mailbox. And the reason I'd have them read it, first of all, I don't have noun-verb agreement. And I think the word funner should be used. But the reason I had them read it is they're looking at it from a global view. And they're saying, Todd, you left this person out. This may embarrass this person. I think you should do this. And they're looking at it from a school view. If I give it to an average teacher, they're looking at it from a selfish view. And so I need people who stand up to me. I have a strong personality, and I need people who stand up to me and say, this is incorrect. Before I have, great principals have faculty meetings teachers look forward to and value. Without exception, there is not a single great principal I've ever found. Thank you, Bobby. That near regardless, we got the world taken care of.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yes, right, exactly. I want to hear questions from Bobby. I want you two off the screen. Okay.
I love Bobby.
What were we talking about here?
Faculty meetings, Friday Focus.
Oh yeah, the faculty meetings. Great principals have faculty meetings teachers look forward to and value. Do you know how I make sure my faculty meetings are things teachers look forward to and value? I go to a superstar teacher in advance and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Here's how I'm thinking about saying this. Is this going to insult anyone? Is this pushing too hard? Is this appropriate? Is this, and then they're giving me guidance and direction that way. And that gives me confidence because I'm not smart enough to know, but they're smart enough to know because they have a global view of the school. You only have in both of your schools, there's only a couple teachers that are always on the side of the principal. There's only a couple that are always on the side of the principal. And you have a couple that would like the principal to cry. And if you think those two people are the same, you can't possibly lead an organization. And I don't even mean it mean, it's just true.
On that note, Todd, we got a great question here from Dr. Dan Kreines, host of the Leader of Learning podcast, talking about teacher resistance. And a few minutes ago, Todd, you mentioned that your great teachers will sometimes disagree or they'll be resistant because their idea is genuinely better or because you are wrong. I can't remember exactly how you put that. But Dan asks, I like your idea that teachers don't resist change, but they resist improvement. Okay, following along here. Do you think they most often resist due to their own self-confidence or maybe a lack of self-confidence? Do you think that's part of teacher resistance sometimes?
Dan, is that a podcast Dan has? If true, what am I wasting my time on this one?
A good one.
It's interesting. I think that self-confidence, confidence is the most valuable gift a leader can give. But I've come to the realization that I don't think it's self-confidence. If you think about it, sometimes your worst teachers are so confident they can go ahead and teach even when none of the kids are paying attention. But the good teachers need the kids paying attention because the good teachers, great people are driven. They're not driven by confidence. They're driven by insecurity. Because when a kid isn't paying attention in a great teacher's classroom, who does the great teacher think the problem is?
Themselves. That's
why they're insecure all the time. When a kid doesn't behave in an ineffective teacher's classroom, who does the ineffective teacher think the problem is?
Kids.
Yeah. And the thing to realize is confidence is important. So I'm not sure, but I think it isn't generalized that weak people don't lack confidence or have confidence. I think that's a tough one. I do believe all really high achievers are driven by insecurity. And that's how come you have to take care of them because then they always are attracted to people who take care of them. That I'm not going to pry on your insecurity. I'm going to actually fill it and support you. The thing to realize, for example, one of the things I used to talk about all the time when I presented was a poor lecturer's classroom. And I would say to the audience, how many people have ever been in a poor lecturer's classroom? Everybody's hand goes up. Okay. Now, which of those three words is the problem? Poor, lecture, or classroom? And I'm going to make it easy on you. I'm going to eliminate the word classroom. And I said, which of those words is the problem? 95% of the people, guess what they say? You're correct. Lecture. Thank you for not answering. Anyhow.
You lost me.
So this is like a one-way deal. Right? Okay. When you think of a poor lecturer's classroom, what's the problem? Which of those words? It isn't classroom. People think it's lecture. No, the answer is poor. The best teacher in your school uses lecture some of the time. The worst teacher in your school uses lecture some of the time. What is not the variable?
The lecture.
Right. But isn't that funny? We think the problem's lecture. And so what happens is then we blanket monkey and say we need to get rid of lecture. The problem is you're taking away the best tool of your best teacher. The best teacher in your school's ability to lecture may be the single best teaching tool in your school. So you reduce it. And what's funny is your ineffective teacher that lectures, that's better than their second best technique. Because if they had a better technique, they'd be doing it. They're not doing their second best technique. They're doing their best technique. But do you know how you get an ineffective teacher to quit lecturing? Give them something better.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't confidence. You give them something better. And that leads to confidence. As their skills build, that leads to confidence. Yeah. Great principals understand their role is to teach the teachers. Average principals think their role is to teach the students. I've been doing a comparison recently. I used to play tennis, okay? And what's interesting in tennis, you can either build your ego or build your skill. But you can't build both. And it's funny how they build on each other. For example, if I play people worse than me, I can beat them every time. And it builds my ego. If I play people better than me, they hammer me and it builds my skill. And so I think it's that same way related to teaching, that I have to build their skill, which builds their confidence, which allows them to build their skill and build their confidence. But what we do in education is we tell people to do something, we don't teach them how. And if you ever think of it, just think of classroom management. Every teacher in your school does the best they know how at classroom management, because classroom management is selfish. And if I tell you to manage your class, you don't know what to do. If I teach you to manage your class, it's different. Just think about, and I always think of my wife and other people of that gender, which is female. But males fall into this category too. I'm really careful. I'm nervous now because now all of a sudden even Fonzie's mad at me. But anyhow, what's interesting is if I told a female out in the store that had her kids, I said, you need to get your kids to behave better. They literally would pull out their claws and attack me. Mm-hmm. But if I taught them to get their kids to behave better, they'd follow me around like the Pied Piper.
Right.
But in education, how often do we tell people to raise their test scores? Which is embarrassing because nobody's been holding back on that.
Right.
But we tell them to because we don't know how to teach them because we don't have the skills to do it. So we're hoping by miracle through osmosis you can figure it out. But that's what leaders are for. That's what your role is to teach people how to be more effective. And they don't resist it. But if you tell them to be more effective, it's like telling a mother, you need to get your kids to behave. That mother's going to be attacking. But inside they want them to behave. I don't mean it that the kids don't behave, but you know what I mean? You want them to behave.
Right.
You're not pushing back on that. You're pushing back on being told.
Yeah.
So I think once you teach people a better skill, they do it. They really do, because teachers want kids to behave. They want test scores to improve, because if no other reason, then it makes their job easier. And that's good enough reason.
Right.
Yes. Am I up?
Go for it.
Thinking about, this might be a little bit of a selfish question, but what recommendations can you come up with for the upcoming school year for all of us and our listeners, for maybe some first year school leaders or leaders moving to a new building or district this summer for this upcoming school year?
Excellent. Well, that follows up on the thing I mentioned. Somebody just emailed me yesterday and they asked for that. The number one thing I tell new leaders and new teachers is trust your gut. I believe your instincts are correct. I really do believe it. You know, it's really interesting. What happens is we get in trouble when we don't trust our gut. And what happens is we get in trouble when we do things average people do. And if we see average so often, we think average is right. You know, we get blanket monkeyed, so we blanket monkey. I'll give you an example here. There is an education program in the country that develops teachers that I know of that tells teachers to yell. Okay, I don't think any of them teach their teachers to yell. What's interesting is a new teacher gets frustrated and the new teacher yells. And it sort of works. You know, it's called short-term pleasure syndrome. It sort of works. The kids behave better for about this long. Mm-hmm. But you know what? That new teacher, they know that's wrong. That makes them feel funny. You know, they're like, I don't like that. That's not the teacher I want to be. I didn't get into education to be that. And if you trust your gut, you won't yell anymore. But if you ignore your gut because the teacher next door to you yells and two other teachers who are no good tell you to yell because they yell, you're going to ignore your gut and you're going to keep yelling. And all of a sudden then it won't even bother you anymore. And I think of that same way as a leader. That same way as a leader, when we blanket monkey, it makes us feel funny. So trust your gut is one thing. The other thing is, I already mentioned, make every decision based on your best teachers and you'll never make a wrong decision. And the other one is this: the single most important event you will ever have as a new principal, it doesn't matter if you've been a principal before, if you're new to a school, is the first faculty meeting of the year, your first year. Teachers are on better behavior then than they're ever going to be at any other point in time, and you're still undefeated. But the real way to think about it is this. It's my only opportunity to establish expectations before I have to start correcting behaviors. All of us can play games. All of us have played different games. I'm talking about board games and card games and all this. And Tim, I bet you played games. Okay, Tim, I think you could play almost any game, but you need to know the rules, don't you?
Right.
And Tim, when would you like to know the rules?
At the beginning.
Okay. In education, are we changing rules in the middle of the game all the time?
Of course. Yeah.
Yep. But the great principals don't.
Right.
And realize the better the people, the more they want to know. The better the people are, the more they want to know the rules. And I'm not talking about rules meaning hard and fast list. They want to know what the expectations are. They want to know what's important to you. They want to know. The secretary wants to know how the principal wants the secretary to answer the phone. And the better they are, the more they want to know. But they only want to know until they answer the phone. Because once they answer the phone, they're no longer establishing expectations. If you say something to them, you're correcting their behavior and you've hurt your relationship with them.
Right. Todd, you asked for a question from Bobby French, and she has delivered. So here it is. She
looks like we're out of time. Thank you, Bobby, for joining. Go ahead. Fine.
She says, okay, Mr. Whitaker, and I think it should be doctor, right? You don't bandy about that title often, but Dr. Whitaker, I'd like to hear more.
I'm the kind of doctor that doesn't actually help people. So you do whatever you want to. Go ahead.
I'd love to hear more on the idea of creating a cool to care culture in your school. And as a couple of middle school administrators, we are listening on this one. So how do we make it cool to care?
Okay. I learned this from my very best teacher. Her name was Georgia Humphreys. And I was in classrooms all the time. And one day I go in Georgia's classroom, and the toughest 8th grader in the school's up there. You know what he looks like. He's got a full beard, covered with tattoos. He actually drove the morning bus route. And, he was up at her desk. And he was going, Mrs. Humphreys, I have a question. Last night I was working on my poem. And in the 3rd stanza, in the 5th line, I couldn't reflect my feelings about, and I'm like, was Candid Camera, was Ashton Kutcher were going to jump out and yell punked? I mean, what is this? And I realized she made it cool to care. And we have to do that as a leader. We adopted, and I don't have time for this because I know we're on a time limit, and it's a story. It's in one of my books. I don't even know which one. But we adopted a multiply handicapped preschool as our sister school. And it was funny how at the very beginning when we started doing it, that some of the cynical teachers would just keep their distance and all this stuff. But we'd read to them once a month. We'd celebrate their birthdays. We'd have holiday parties for them. We'd show videos of the kids. The handicapped kids would come to our school and do assemblies for our kids. They realized it makes a difference. What you do makes a difference. And it just emotion, it's dealing with emotion versus just dealing with logic. It's what it really is.
Yeah. Well, as you know, we reached out because we have a bunch of leaders and aspiring leaders who will be participating in a book study via Voxer coming up for the summer reading of What Great Principals Do Differently. So what advice could you give Tim and I as we help facilitate conversations that will have all of us be able to get the most out of the book?
I don't know. I don't know.
Buy the study guide?
Ask people. If somebody had the study guide, there's guiding questions on each chapter and ideas and all that kind of stuff. You could always buy it, read it, and then return it. I think that it's pretty each chapter is independent, and I think maybe that's another way to do it. I see a lot of principals use What Great Teachers Do Differently and do book studies, and their faculty they'll have their faculty choose a chapter to role play at a faculty meeting or discuss at a faculty meeting and share, because they're so standalone. Most of my books are about the length of an average restroom visit. And so that's easy. And it's really just thinking of, does this applicable? But ask people, is this true or not? Does this make sense or not? And it doesn't hurt my story. It doesn't hurt my feelings to have people think no. I don't think they'll think no, but they're standalone. And that's the thing I like. You can have like I mentioned, the first faculty meeting of the year. I have a chapter on the first faculty meeting of the year. So you can just go read that. You don't have to read anything else. It doesn't matter. I mentioned the Friday focus. You don't have to read the whole book, Motivating Inspiring Teachers. You can go to 2 chapters. I only put the second chapter in because Friday Focus is so popular and people all over the world use it, I wanted to go into more explanation. Why did I use this word? Why did I mention this person's name? Because I see, if you know anything about me, first of all, I apologize, but if you know anything about me, I want people to be more effective. I want them to be better. I want to give them direction. My third book was dealing with difficult parents because I never wanted any of my teachers to call parents if they didn't know what to say. And I didn't want you to not know what to say if an angry parent called you, because you lose confidence. You know, I mean, you could have had it, but you lose confidence. But once I teach you word for word what to say, I mean word for word. If you've read any of my books, they are word for word. Now you have confidence. And I used to always teach my teachers, this is all just faculty meetings, I just put them in books. I used to always teach my teachers this. I go, I can't think of 2 things that'll work, but here's one just in case. Because you know what I've realized? We all just need one just in case. Your best teacher doesn't have 11 different things that work. They have one that always works. Mm-hmm. And the problem is your worst teacher has 11 that don't work. That's the problem. They don't need new ideas. They need better. All this stuff about innovate. What a joke. We don't need innovation. We need replication. Michelle, in your school, do you have at least one teacher that literally has figured it out?
Yes, of course.
Do they need to innovate?
No.
Do they
inspire
need
the kids to
Are
try and
they
think?
good
It
already,
depends on your
or do they-
definition of innovation, I think.
Okay. What they do now, is it working?
Yes.
Okay. So do they need to do something different than what they're doing now?
No, they can springboard on what they have. They've got a good solid foundation for sure. Yeah.
Okay. It's not a solid foundation. It's spectacular. I said your best teacher. I didn't say one that's a solid
No,
veteran.
you're right. You're right.
And what's interesting is your job is to get people to be like that teacher.
Yeah.
Not to get that
right.
teacher to change. Your job is to get everybody else to be like that teacher. And that's very different than innovating. Because the thing is, if you tell people to innovate, when should they stop?
Yeah, right. They might toss out everything that's working, and that's not what we want. No.
And that's what happens when we focus on programs instead of people, is we force them to toss out things that they really want to hang on to. And
Sure.
Sometimes it's the things the very best teachers want to hang on to.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow. Oh, one other thing and I mean this sincerely, my daughters both teach. And one of my daughters, she had virtual and hybrid, and she was doing both. She found that some of her kids learned better virtually. But the reason they learned better is because she would record her lessons and the kids could replay it. So now in person, she records all her lessons and posts them online so the parents can all see them and the kids can replay them. And in addition, there's kids that replay them during class. In other words, I just did a 10-minute instruction on something. She teaches math. I did a 10-minute instruction. They now have control of replaying it. And she's always going to do that forever. And then the parents can see it too.
Right.
And that's an example of something that isn't new. That's an example of something that we figured out that we should have probably been doing. And some teachers were doing it. And instead, we're going to just provide it for all people.
Yeah,
definitely.
Michelle, I think we do have time for this one. Todd, could you speak? And I should say, by the way, that this is primarily a show for teachers, but we're speaking to teachers of teachers today and aspiring leaders. So that's the direction of this question. For those that we know who are aspiring to become an administrator, become a principal or an AP around the country, what is your advice to them? What direction should they be going right now as they try to take that next step? Or I shouldn't say the next step, try to take that step.
Right. Well, but I think it is a next step in the sense of it's just continuing to expand your influence. It's not more important. It's just you're influencing more people. I think there's 2 things. One is anyone that wants to be a principal, the first step is to be a really, really, really good teacher, because it's exactly the same skill set. It's the same skill set you use to teach the students, you're going to use to teach the teachers. The problem is when we have average principal. I always think it's funny when people have an average principal. They go. They forgot how to be a teacher. They forgot. No, it wasn't. They just weren't good enough. They weren't good enough as a teacher. You didn't have an exceptional teacher who became a principal and then they forgot. You don't forget that. They just never had it. It's sort of like when they say those people that say, well, they're burned out may not have been on fire in the first place. We have to remember that. But the best advice I can give is to be exceptional teacher. Be exceptional. And then realize also the skill set. The best advice I ever got as a principal, you don't have to prove who's in charge. Everybody knows who's in charge. And the more you try to prove it, the more people try to prove you wrong. Well, the best teachers already do that anyhow. How often does the best teacher in a school try to prove who's in charge in that classroom? Never. Everybody knows. How often does the worst teacher try to prove who's in charge in that classroom? 20 times an hour and there's 25 kids pedaling as fast as they can to prove them wrong. So if that teacher then becomes a principal, they're going to try to prove who's in charge again, and it's not going to work then either. It's the same skill set. The other thing is the biggest disadvantage a principal has is if they've never worked with a great principal. Because if you've never worked with a great principal, you have to figure it out on your own. You know, when I said great principals, without exception, have faculty meetings teachers look forward to and value, just think if you've never worked with a great principal, not only do you not know how to have faculty meetings people value, you didn't even know it was possible. Mm-hmm. And now all you know is it's possible. You still don't know how to do it because you've never seen one. And so that's the best thing you could do. But the thing you're most in control of is be a highly effective teacher yourself. The best teacher, the best principal treats their teachers like the best teachers treat the students. They always treat them with respect and dignity, but they also do not allow bullies. They do not allow inappropriate behavior by other people within the group. And the great teachers know it's their job. It's average principals tell their teachers to stand up to bully teachers. I always tell my teachers, that's not your job, that's my job. Mm-hmm. Your job is to do right even when colleagues do wrong. And that's a tough enough job. I used to always teach my teachers this. I go, how about this? I take care of the adults, you all take care of the students. How's that sound? And the teachers would sign up for that in a second because it was no fun for them to have to take care of it. If you have children, do you expect your children to fix their friends? No. Would a great teacher expect the kids to stand up to a bully kid? No, that's their job. So why would a principal, how weak is that the principal tells the teachers to stand up to their negative colleagues? That's not their job, that's your job. It's hard enough for your children to do right when their friends do wrong. And it might be impossible for your children to fix their friends when their friends do wrong. And that's an unrealistic expectation. But asking your own children to do right when their friends do wrong, I think is a very appropriate expectation to have. And that's what I ask my teachers. I need you to do right even when your colleagues do wrong. And then let me work on the colleagues. And the teachers would seem like they'd sign up for that all day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we are wrapping this thing up, bringing it to a close. Michelle, any final words or thoughts for our guests today?
No, I just want to say, Todd, thank you again for taking the time. We are so honored to have spent this time with you. And, you know, I know the people that are listening and watching today are, feeling the exact same way. We know some of them through our connections. And I agree with you completely that that's one of the best pieces of advice for aspiring administrators is to work with someone who is doing the right things and find that mentor. And while some of us might not have someone in our own district or in our own school, that's why we connect places like this, because we have our tribes that we find and we work with all across the country and the world. So thank you for taking the time to share with us today.
My pleasure. It's just like tennis. You can't learn how to be great from average people because average people don't know how to be great.
Right.
And, you're going to have to swallow an ego and try to learn from people who doesn't mean they're better than you in general, but there's specific things that they probably have more knowledge and experience with than you do. The last thing I want to mention here is anybody get a hold of me anytime. I'm nobody. My website's toddwhitaker.com. On Twitter, I'm at Todd Whitaker. I'm hacked, but hopefully within a day or two, it'll be solved. And it's really funny. I always share this. Teaching is the most isolated profession there is, and you're never alone. And principling is very close. So sometimes it's just lonely and you want a neutral outsider's opinion, call me or email me anytime you want to. I'm nobody, but if you just want somebody to chat with or visit with, call me or email me anytime.
And that is true. Todd is very accessible.
That's true. There it is, toddwhitaker.com. Thank you so much again, Todd, for sharing your time with us today. And I do want to give a shout out once again. The reason behind this conversation today was this book study. We are getting into what great principals do differently. The book study, we've had the chat with the author himself today. And if you are interested in joining us, make sure you reach out to me or Michelle. We'll make sure we get you plugged in here in short order. But thank you again, Todd. This has been wonderful. You've provoked our thinking. You've made us a little bit uncomfortable at times and given us a lot to think about. So really appreciate your time and hope you get that Twitter account back up and running. But if you do need to start a new one, let us know and we'll get that going as well.
God, I was thinking about taking Tim Cavey, but I haven't decided. But anyhow, no, if I can give you a holler anytime. And I just want to thank everybody for making a difference every day. What a wonderful thing to have people like the audience and people like you all choosing education, because you've chosen a profession that matters. And that's a tribute. And I'm glad people like you are the ones that are in the profession that matters. Thanks for what you do. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks so much. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.